Hi, welcome everybody. This is Saturday, and it's the 2nd of March, and this is the Rockport Affordable Housing Coalition with an info session and an intro session about affordable housing. We're supposed to be here for 90 minutes. We have a lot of presenters and some exciting information. My name is Laura Evans, and I'm a volunteer on this Affordable Housing Coalition. And we'd like to thank the Rockport Library for hosting us, and Tom for running the Zoom, and welcome to all the Zoomers. And I said the library for hosting us, and you for giving up these hour and a half on a Saturday morning to come and learn about this really important opportunity for our town, and to learn about what affordable housing is and is not. It's a really complex topic fraught with a lot of misinformation, et cetera. So today we're hoping to disambiguate a lot of the misinformation and give you information about what affordable housing is in Rockport. Because affordable is an adjective, and people throw it around as if it's something very simple, but it's not. And in fact, it has very specific meanings about what housing is in our town. And so that's what we hope you'll emerge today from. We have some very interesting speakers that are going to give us a lot of information. We're going to start out with an introduction to a new family in town who just moved into the Granite Crossing and are going to tell us what the experience is like. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and we've talked a lot about Rockport and our long history. Well, we get to hear now from Cassandra and Anthony and Gigi about what Rockport is like when you just moved here 2 months ago, and we're very excited about that. And then we're going to hear from Diane Vella, who's the head of the Rockport Affordable Housing Trust, the Municipal Rockport Affordable Housing Trust. And after each of the presentations, we will hear a Q&A from you. And we have two runners in the audience, Ken and Lori Kaiser, so they'll bring the mic to you if you have a question. I'm going to be pretty strict about the time to respect everybody donating their time to the town at this time. Jay Reed is going to then talk about the different affordable housing initiatives going on in town. And then Tom is going to talk about the water and sewer situation, which is high on everybody's list. And so lastly, then, what's the last one is, we'll hear from a senior who's living in the Granite Crossing development there across from the train station. So again, we're going to have each presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A. So it's going to be participatory. We'd like to have a conversation with folks. And if you save your questions till the end of any given presentation. This is not, we do not want to cover the MBTA, the mandated zoning that the planning board is working on. That's a whole separate thing, and we'd spend an hour and a half talking about that. So we just want to keep the topic to what is, because they're two separate mandates from the state. Rockport is mandated to have 10% of its housing stock deemed affordable, and right now we're at 4.6%. So that's basically what we're going to be talking about this morning. How do we get from 4.6 to 10%? So thank you, and I'm going to turn it over now to Cassandra, and hopefully we'll hear from Anthony and Gigi. And so Cassandra, welcome to town.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Cassandra. This is my two kids, Anthony and Kaylee. We moved to Granite Street Crossing December 13th. We entered the housing lottery, and we were very fortunate that the few people that were in line before us phased out for one reason or another. So we got the lucky ticket. Prior to winning the lottery with Granite Street Crossing, I had been on housing wait lists since my son was an infant, 5-6 years. And I wasn't sleeping on the street, but I was, by all meanings of the word, homeless. I didn't have a home for my son and I, or for my two kids and I. We had a roof over our heads. My grandmother, very fortunately for me, always took me in, but it was less than ideal. It was a very toxic household for me and for my kids. They witnessed numerous domestic disturbances between my younger brother and I. I'm also in recovery, pretty deep in my recovery, but some other people in the household were actively using. So there were multiple risk factors living where we were. Granite Street Crossing has changed my life in more ways than I could ever say. I tell Alex all the time, pinch me, because it's like I'm in a dream. I'm me again. I'm not constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of, what's going to happen in the house, what my kids are going to witness, what my future is going to be like, where we're going to live. We have a beautiful, beautiful home in the most beautiful, neighborhood that I've ever seen. My very first impression of Rockport was I went to the Market Basket in Gloucester with my kids, and they were a little rowdy. They were kind of acting up. I tried to keep my cool the best I could, and an older gentleman came up to me with the most warm smile, and he handed me a $25 Market Basket gift card, and he wished me a Merry Christmas. And I remember going through the store almost crying. I continually meet more and more people. I already know some of the moms in the schools, and it's just such a change for us. I'm now going to the gym for the first time in my life. I go every day. I've lost 5 pounds. I'm just all around healthier. My kids tell me every few days, I love you, Mom. Thank you for this house. I love our new house. It's been the biggest blessing in the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra, and welcome to Rockport.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Anthony, Gigi, anybody have any questions for Cassandra and her family? Yes?
Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering how you identified the opportunity here. What was it that made you realize that this was an opportunity? And perhaps where did you come from geographically?
Okay, so prior to Rockport, we were living in Peabody. My daughter was attending Pathways for Children, which is a Head Start program in Beverly. And I was very engaged with the social worker that was assigned to us while she attended Head Start. My son's father, my husband, I call him my husband, he was very emotionally abusive. So I had just separated from my husband. Her father had just passed away. So I really needed some supports, and I was reaching out, and she heard about the housing lottery, and she helped me apply.
And you had a question, sir? Would you please wait for the mic? Because the Zoomers have to
I
hear
can
you.
speak loud enough so everybody hears me. I make a point of it at
Thank you.
every public meeting. But anyway.
Would you identify yourself, please, Z?
What's that?
Can you identify yourself, please, Z?
Sure, Z. Sepula, 92 Granite Street. You sounded like you really know what affordable housing really means. You mentioned that you'd won a lottery. I suspect many people that need it don't have any lottery or are unlucky in the lottery.
Yeah.
And I guess the question that we all have in Rockport is that affordable housing has been an issue here for years, but there's never been any real progress towards making more of it. And it doesn't seem like some of the other state initiatives have any means towards making more progress either. So I think what I just want to say quickly, but I never am, is that thank you for coming here and explaining your story and perhaps giving some of us a really better idea of what it actually does mean, because most of us, I think, don't have any real conception of what the real problems are. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So welcome again, Cassandra, Anthony, and Gigi. Welcome to Rockport. We hope to see you at Millbrook Park, at the playground.
Oh, we'll be there
at
for the
beach.
Easter egg hunt.
Oh, one more question from.
Hi there. Thank you for your story.
Oh, thank you.
So I have two questions.
Would you
One
please
is,
identify yourself?
yes,
sir?
Jim Ugoni, 33 Main Street, Rockport.
Okay.
So my two questions to you is, you've been through a lot. You're at a stable spot now.
Yeah.
And based upon all of your experiences, and maybe some from even your friends and others, how do you perceive this in the continuum in a perfect world, of what this stop means to you and where you go from here. And another question that I have is regarding your budget to be able to afford to live here, raising 2 kids, etc. What is the role of daycare and its costs and its importance in the affordability metric?
Okay, so those are two really good questions. So the first one, I guess what you're asking is like the trajectory. What do I see my future being? And I think the misconception about affordable housing that a lot of people have is that you're enabling somebody to stay in the system and that they're not going to better their lives. At least with me, I can speak from personal experience that that is absolutely not the case. What this has enabled me to do is to separate from a toxic environment, to be the best mom I can be for my kids without any outside interference. I am in college. I'm on my 2nd semester. I've made the dean's list both semesters. I'm attending North Shore for engineering. So this isn't the be-all, end-all for me. This is the biggest blessing in the world, but someday hopefully I'll have a home, that I can leave to my kids. This is just my stepping stone. So it's really great, but it's the common misconception is that you're just giving somebody a handout, and it's absolutely not that at all, at least for me.
Thank you, Cassandra. And what about the child care issue?
Well, the child care issue, at least that I'm experiencing, is that it's very impossible to find. There's not enough of them. They're, fortunately for a lot of others, they're taking in a lot of the refugees, which I envy, but there's no openings for her. So what I've done, I'm adapting. I'm doing online classes. She's home with me. Hopefully come the fall, they'll have an opening for her. In that time, I can do in-person classes again, maybe take on a 3rd class. But for now, I'm managing.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. And thank you again for coming and speaking.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great. You can go.
All right, thank you.
Okay, they have other things to do, so thank Your first job as panelists, kids. So I'd like to introduce Diane Vella, who's the chair of our Rockport Affordable Housing Committee. And it was voted in by, excuse me? Trust, I'm sorry. Rockport Affordable Housing Trust, which we townspeople voted in 2017. And it's been set up in 2023 and is gaining steam. And Diane Vella is going to tell us what is going on.
Oh, good morning, and good morning to the Zoomers. And my job is to talk to you a little bit about what are the affordable housing definitions. Lots of people are using these definitions, and we're not clear about what affordable housing is, that it can be an umbrella definition, but it really, for us, is a very specific income qualified matrix that is established by the federal government where people's income qualifies them to have a rent or a home lower than the market rate of that housing costs. So the lower costs are based on their income and the number of people in their households. Many people will use affordable housing to describe housing for some other reason, may be below market rate. For example, there's a lot of people who believe if you just build housing, that law of supply and demand will reduce the cost. Or some people believe that if you just make things smaller, like tiny houses or modular homes, that will reduce off the market rate. Others believe that if you exclude land from the sale of a building or a house or a unit, that could reduce the cost. And those probably are true. But they probably can't get to the affordable housing rate that is established by the state and the federal government. And also know that we have 2 big pressures in this town. One is called, we are asset heavy. What that means is our biggest asset, what's our asset in this town? The ocean, the scenery, the rocks. So we are asset heavy, so people want to be here. That drives housing costs up. The other is we are at the end of the mobility chain. And what that means is, and all of you can look at your history of, you probably rented a place and then you saved your money for a house and then you moved into a little bigger house when you had kids. And so there's a mobility chain around housing. We in Rockport are at the end of the mobility chain. Therefore, people stay. So that also limits our housing stock, which keeps our prices high. So also, affordable housing is not public housing. It's important that you understand there's a difference. The Rockport Housing Authority owns and operates the units, for instance, at Millbrook Park. And affordable housing can be owned by a range of organizations, both public and private, and we have a broader income regulations and can accept a broader amount of income for people, where the Rockport Housing Authority and public housing is pretty stringent. It's usually targeted at extremely low income and very vulnerable populations. Affordable housing aims to provide housing for a much broader range of people. So you have handouts, and the first one is a little map that looks like this, that our affordable housing income limits is established by HUD, the Housing and Urban Development. Thank you. Oh, perfect. And this is our district. It goes all the way from New Hampshire, all the way down practically to Cape Cod. It's quite big. And then your next handout that you have is the actual income limits for the affordable housing in that district that I just told you about. If you'll notice, the median family income, median, meaning that there are 50% below and 50% above income for this district that we live in, is $149,000 a year. That's a pretty substantial income. Rockport, on the other hand, our median income is $89,000 a year. So the median income in this district, our district, is one of the highest in the nation. And I think that's important for us to really think about as we unpack these numbers. So monthly housing costs are determined by banks and everybody to be no more than 30% of your monthly income. And that would include maintenance, interest, utilities, all kinds of things. So affordable housing favors rental units. Why? Because they don't have to hire a lawn service. They don't have to, the heating costs are lower. All kinds of things are lower with units that are together, not single family homes. So who qualifies for affordable housing in Rockport? If you look on the next sheet, those are the income for workers in Rockport on the 2023-24 budget. You're gonna have to make that, yeah. So the point is that affordable housing in this town is for essential workers, is for our teachers, our DPW, that 50% of the people on the North Shore that work in a town have to travel to get to their job because they can't afford to live here. So this is an ecological issue as well. And then we need to think about, in addition to our workers in town, we want to think about our seniors who are living on Social Security alone. That's a whole nother group. So affordable housing is for our teachers, for our police officers, for our DPW. They're for all of our essential workers, the people that work in our stores, your servers. It's for it's have a broad spectrum, as you can see from the chart with the incomes, and we can talk more about that. The state of Massachusetts, of the Commonwealth, I come from Michigan, so everything's a state, sorry. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts requires that all towns have a minimum amount, 10% minimum of affordable housing, and as Laura said, we're behind the 8 ball on that. What this means is that it leaves us somewhat open to what's called hostile 40B developers, which means that because we are below that 10%, they can come in and bypass some of our zoning regulations and some of our other regulations. This has not happened yet. We sure as heck don't want it to happen. We want to be able to control what's built, how it looks in this area. It's important that we do that. So multifamily, which is where Cassandra and her family came from, as you know, in this, at the Granite Street Crossing, 17 of those 23 units were for seniors and only 6 were for families. And families are where it's at. So it is in the best interest of our businesses, our schools, and our community, and ecologically, because single-family, low-occupancy homes are the greatest user of resources, electricity and water. So it's important that this is an ecological issue as well. So if you want to take a look at the next handout, which is surprising facts, I think some of these we've talked about, some of them are new. I think that it's important to know some of these facts that are affecting and driving and will drive the trust to, and these are on handouts, if there's handouts, if you can't see, they're driving how the trust strategic plan will be as we move forward. One of the things that I think is most shocking to me was 50% of Rockporters are considered what's called shelter burdened, which means substantially more than their 30% of their income goes to shelter. And I told you what shelter was. For instance, a 1-bedroom apartment, average median rental, or 1-bedroom apartment in Rockport is $1,900, not including utilities or insurance. This means the person who lives there needs to make at least $76,000 a year. 2-bedroom is $2,500, a little over $2,500, almost $2,600. That's the median in Rockport. So what that means is less money goes to buying something at Cracker Jack's, buying something, going out to dinner. They're not, we want year-round families that can support this town and use the town services. That's what we want. The rest of this, I think is important for us to look at and to think about, and you can read that on your own, because I don't want to, how am I doing on time?
You've got a couple more minutes,
Okay,
but maybe listen for some questions and then come
sure.
back.
We have any questions so far? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Jim Ugoni, 33 Main Street. Do you know, I've searched hard for the metrics about our existing situation before I can think about what we have and to really understand, and it was hard to try to go and look at what we have now. I think I knew what we have, and I drove around to all the various properties that we have and how many housing units are in each one of those available properties. My question to you is, do you know, or is there a place for me to check my facts to know what we do have? And then my other question is, how is, it used to be called the Sandy Bay Estates, how is that recognized?
Sandy Bay Estates is private.
But is there Section 8, and is Section 8 included?
Maybe Section 8, which is, and that's one of the hard numbers to nail down. I'd like to introduce you. Where did he go? Oh, is Peter Souza, who is on the board of the Rockport Housing Authority, and so he can talk to you more about Section 8. That again is under the auspices of the Rockport Housing Authority, not the affordable housing. And it is hard to get. I get sympathize with you. So our affordable housing in Rockport right now are the high school apartments, Granite Street Crossing.
How many in the high school, Diane?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know these numbers, and they've. I know it's hard. Oh, good. What was your total number?
So the interesting thing is the Granite Street apartments, the high school apartments, and I don't remember specifically what they were, but what I want to do is make sure that we do have the right data so we can make the right decisions of what we need, and then that wonky metric that you're trying to achieve the 10% number, and the state knows that you've got it in your sights.
Absolutely.
And then the baseline metric from which that 10% number is counted, which is different from the density consideration. And it's roughly all the housing units in Rockport minus the vacant properties, which is roughly 3,000 units. And that's where you get your basis by which to determine what we're supposed to have. That's not what, we may need more than that or something, but at least we know where we are.
Yeah. No, and one of the things that's happening is that we have a housing production plan that is happening right now in this town for the first time. We're a little bit late to the party about to get this stuff done. So that will help us with it. But anyway, the affordable housing units that are here now are the high school, Granite Street, Pigeon Cove, and Kitefield Road and Millbrook Meadow. Again, those are under the auspices of the Rockport Housing Authority. They own that land and they manage those units. In affordable housing, that's done a lot of time. Like for instance, the people that are working at Granite Street Crossing and the people that work at the high school apartments, those are run by Harbor Light, and they have their own staff to do that. That's a part of. We're not paying for it, but it's a part of the rent that they charge and the subsidies that they get. Because in affordable housing, if we meet those metrics, those developers get a subsidy for having them there. Otherwise, the construction costs are construction costs, whether it's market rate or affordable. So there's a huge gap for the affordable housing people. So that's why they start to get funding from lots of different places and subsidies and grants from lots of different places to make up that gap and to have staff at the place in particular.
Another question? Diane, do we have a deadline to get to that 10%?
Hi, Andrea Vinson. I'm at Row Point. So the things owned by the Rockport or run by Rockport Housing Authority are not considered affordable housing?
Yes, they are.
So that adds into the
Yes, it does.
the total 10%.
It does.
Okay.
So it's like they're not under they're under a little different affordable housing metrics, and their structure is different than what we're doing. Am I saying that right? Okay. So maybe Peter can answer any other questions that you might have about the housing authority. If I can spend a few minutes about talking about the myths and barriers around affordable housing. There's a lot of myths that affordable housing will not help our community, and the reality is it provides choice. And not everybody wants to own a house. And remember that mobility chain. That's what we're interested in. So smaller multifamily homes allow seniors to stay in our community. The tax rate, this is important for people to understand because I've heard this is a myth. The tax rate for multifamily complexes is higher than that for single family homes. And the other thing is dirt, such as parks, town-owned land, Concom land, they don't pay taxes. And if you look at the map of Rockport, we have a lot of land that is not developable or is owned by the town, and they don't pay taxes. They don't pay property taxes. So that's important for us to know. Affordable housing doesn't fit in our community. They paint people as being from the outside, bringers of crime. And as I said, that this is for essential workers, young people, young families, and affordable housing, by the way, screens their renters way more than anybody that has a VRBO in Rockport screens their renters, or anybody that even is renting, in their own home. So it's important that you know that they are screened very well. They maintain the communities. They work within the communities to decide how much open space is allowed in that community. Affordable housing is a myth that it hurts property values. Projects don't have a negative impact on property values in any study that I could find. It supports local business, it increases discretionary spending, and it promotes year-round residents. Affordable housing will overburden schools or have an impact on schools. Very new study that just came out. Increasing the housing stock, in other words, building something that has no affordability in it, increasing the housing stock does nothing to increase the population of the schools. It's a fantastic, and I'm happy to give this study. What does have an impact on schools is birth rate and demographics. That the greatest indicators to increase school enrollment are affordability of houses and parents wanting a great, substantial school system. That's what's important to get kids in school here, not just building more. It's a myth that people believe that it increases traffic. Most affordable housing communities have shorter commutes. Remember, 50% of our workers don't live in town, or they're going out of town. Affordable housing hurts the environment, and again, it does not hurt the environment. Single-family housing, and in Rockport, we have 74% single-family housing, and an unbelievable majority, if you look at the HPP stats, are 1 or 2 people living in that house. Do I have a couple more minutes?
I think we're pretty much at the end, if you want to just do a quick summary, and then we can move on to Jay.
Sure. I'd be happy to. I have a lot of barriers. I understand what the barriers are. We can talk about that. You can see me. We can talk about that later. But I think to understand that building housing can take up to 6 years for affordable housing builders. Early local funding is what they leverage to build affordable housing and to get other banks and subsidies to get that housing built. The trust is looking for all avenues to build our coffers so that we can support affordable housing. The smaller the development, the more town money is needed for affordable housing builders. As I said, Rockport is a little bit late to the party. It has been documented that the citizens have wanted affordable housing for more than 50 years. Affordable housing is a broad swath of people that can come into this town. The lost middle, which lots of people talk about, our essential workers, and our seniors. So we always appreciate your feedback, and come to our meetings and ask questions.
Thank you, Diane. And though Rockport has been pursuing affordable housing for some 50 years, there's different initiatives that have sprung up, both public and private. And Jay Reed is here to kind of walk us through what, and again, to try to disambiguate what we control as the public, what private initiatives are being made, and to inform us about those. Jay Reed?
Thank you. James Reed, 3 Canterbury Lane. This is a review of affordable housing programs in Rockport. You may refer to the paper marked Rockport Affordable Housing Organizations. These programs exist because there is a housing shortage and prices exceeded many people's capacity to pay. I'll begin with Action Incorporated. Action, started in 1965, offers legal and rental assistance and affordable housing to low-income residents of Cape Ann. Action is largely government-funded. Community Preservation Committee supports rental assistance offered by Action. They have a board of directors and a paid staff. Rockport Housing Authority, since 1948, administers state and federal rental assistance programs for people living at Millbrook Park, Kitefield Road, senior apartments. They have a volunteer board of directors, mostly elected from townspeople, and a paid staff, and they are subject to open meeting laws because they are a public entity. They can apply to CPC, that is the Community Preservation Committee, for funding specific projects. They offer Section 8 vouchers to qualifying residents. Extremely low-income renters earning less than 30% of the area median income make up 84% of households served by Rockport Housing Authority. Very low-income renters earning less than 50% of the area median income are 98% of Rockport Housing Authority residents. Rockport Community Land Trust was created in 2021. There is little information on their website. A typical community land trust is private, nonprofit corporation with a board of directors, most of whom are elected by a majority of its members. A community land trust typically buys properties and offers the home for sale while retaining the land that the building sits on and leases it to the owners of the building. From the Community Land Trust website, Community Land Trust, quote, Community Land Trust creates affordable housing for working families. Community Land Trust seeks to create an inventory of homes in Rockport that serve as sustainable, perpetual, income, affordable residence for qualified first home buyers, unquote. Typically, the Community Land Trust has a governing board of directors who represent the Community Land Trust leaseholders, then residents from the service area who are not leaseholders, and residents who represent the public interest. Rockport Community Land Trust has 2 select board members and business owners, including a builder. Funding for most community land trust grants typically comes from government sources or private foundations. While the goal of subsidized housing in a community is 10%, properties created by community land trusts counting towards the subsidized housing goal of 10% must be offered at 80% of the area median income or less to be funded by Massachusetts public agencies like the Department of Housing and Community Development. The town needs to work towards 10% to avoid unregulated development. Community Land Trust is eligible for CPC funds, Community Preservation Committee funds, for specific projects only. Many land trusts require home buyers to have incomes no greater than 80% of the area median income. From Fannie Mae, the North Shore area median income exceeds $141,000. 80% of that area median income is $113,000. As of the 2020 census, Rockport had 3,565 housing units, of which 135 counted as subsidized housing inventory, or 3.79%, and that has increased because of Rockport Crossing. Granite Street Crossing. Rockport Affordable Housing Trust is a public entity subject to open meeting laws, and trustees are appointed by the Select Board. Rockport Affordable Housing Trust was created in 2017 and activated in 2023. They are eligible for community preservation funding and may accumulate funds for future projects. Trust has a board of trustees, including a member of the select board, a member of the planning board or its designate, and 5 residents at large who may have backgrounds in affordable housing, specifically financial, legal, real estate, or development expertise. Rockport Affordable Housing Trust aims to increase the inventory of affordable housing units that count towards subsidized housing inventory, targeting low to extremely low individuals and families. Funding sources potentially include CPC funds, inclusionary zoning payments, negotiated developer fees, the municipalities, that is our general fund, tax title sales, payments from special bylaws or ordinances, cell tower lease payments, and private donations. The Select Board must approve the Rockport Affordable Housing Trust borrowing of money, obtaining a mortgage, pledging assets, purchasing, sale, lease, exchange, or transfer of property. Rockport Affordable Housing Coalition, formed last year, is an advocacy group that seeks to encourage housing at 80% of area median income and below, qualifying for a subsidized housing inventory goal of 10%, with open membership, rotating leadership, and advised by Essex County Community Organization, a network of faith groups, and the North Shore Labor Group, and collaborates with the Massachusetts Community Action Network. Questions?
It's a lot of information, Jay. Thank you. We have a question.
Pass the mic down.
Thank you. My name's Ihor Bilik. I live at 28 Highview Road. Questions I had were a little bit different. One is there a requirement for transportation to be close by affordable housing? For example, it has to be near a train station or some kind of bus route. And the second question is, what areas is there a map of Rockport where affordable housing can be located, and other areas where it cannot be located? Is there like boundaries where it can be built or not? Thank you.
Dan, you want to take that?
Sure. The zoning map is public. You can see the zoning map, and it'll show where the single-family homes are and where multifamily housing is. This is a planning board member, Tom, here. He might answer that question a little more thoroughly. And your other question was? Oh, no. A lot of people think that the MBTA stuff is affordable housing, the stuff that's going on with the MBTA district. It is not. They have made, the state wants this to be zoned, and at this point, there is no affordability covenant within that. The trust and other people in town are working very hard to change that, so that there is at least a minimum of 10% affordability of anybody that builds in that district.
Thank you, Diane. And I asked a question earlier about the deadline for the town to reach the 10%. Jay, do you know, or Diane, what that deadline is before we can, you hear so much about the hostile 40B developers coming in. Is there?
As far as I know, there is no deadline. Our HPP, the Housing Production Plan that's in progress right now, will give us a pathway approved by the state for how much progress we need to make year to year to get what they call safe harbor. So we might not be able to get to the 10% unless we get some, I mean, we're about 200 units short, at least 200 units short. So that's unlikely that that's going to happen. especially when affordable housing developers take about 6 years to do it. So, we're going to be really looking at that HPP, and we are going to be hiring a consultant to work on a strategic plan so that those things can be presented to the state to stave off any
Thank you.
kind of 40B development.
Any other questions for Mr. Reed? Yes, Alan.
Thank you. Alan Macmillan, 18 Story Street, Pigeon Cove. Three things come up here, and I don't think you have not addressed them yet, but I see them as critical. Sewer and water.
They're coming up.
They
That's
are coming up,
next.
so
Yep.
I'll wait for that. But I also think about the actual construction of homes. Builders would call them stick-built homes, where they start from scratch and buy all the lumber and build something. There are multiple entities in New England who build prefab houses, and I see that as a great way to have more affordable housing in a sooner period of time in history. Because a stick-built house can take over a year to build. When I lived on the south end of town, I had a next-door neighbor. I went to work in the morning. He had already had a foundation poured. I came home from work in the evening, and he had a 2-story house sitting there. So why are we not seeking out more often than not pre-built homes, which are just as good in quality if you seek out a reputable builder? So I'd like an answer to that, please. Thank you.
Well, at some of the affordable housing meetings, that's exactly what you've been talking about, right? Tiny houses and pre-built homes as an option to stick-built homes. Diane, is that?
Nothing's off the table at this point. We're looking to get the biggest bang for our buck, if you will. And again, that, we know that with single-family homes, that amount of maintenance and things that go into that 30% is raised. And so whether it's a little house or a big house, there's a lot more maintenance, and so that it impacts the amount of income for a lower income person. So absolutely, we're looking at it. It's a great idea, and it's not off the table.
We have a question from in the back of the room. He hasn't spoken yet.
That thing about affordable housing is a very, very, very good point. I haven't heard it,
Could
Diane.
you identify yourself?
Oh,
sir?
Gerard Roy, 119 Main Street.
Thank you.
Sorry. Diane, I haven't heard that a lot of affordable housing meetings about prefab. Should I turn this off? About prefab structures. And I think the reason why it's not hot, because 50 years ago or so, prefab had a very bad reputation, not working well. But in European countries, they really perfected prefab, and it is inexpensive. Another driving force against it is, unfortunately, I'm a strong union supporter, but unions are very much against prefab because they like the idea of a stick built. Diana, I just want to clarify. You mentioned a figure earlier, $89,000 per year. Did you say that was the area median income for Rockport? You gave some figure when you mentioned the 149.
Rockport in particular, 149 is for our area.
Right.
But 89,000, the 2020 census, the median income for Rockport was 89,000.
Wow, I just find that incredibly low for Rockport. It's really surprised me. That's why I wanted the clarification. That's interesting.
Is that just Rockport residents, or is it all people who own property in Rockport as well?
The census. It was from the
Interesting.
census. And
Interesting.
a median income, remember, half or higher
Half or lower, yeah.
and half or lower.
Okay. Could you just speak about the possibility of the MBTA procedure or process,
I'm
including
sorry, we
affordable
can't.
housing?
I said at the beginning, we really can't address that because that's a
Well,
complex.
I'm thinking. Well, It's like the elephant in the room. It's just really bizarre because you're talking about the middle people that you listed up here, the DPW, police, et cetera, et cetera. Those are affordable housing people that you talked about. So the MBTA, I think, is a good idea, well-intentioned, and unfortunately, I hate to say this, maybe a well-intentioned tragedy by the bureaucracy, which I've worked for, many have worked for before, and a lot of programs go awry. And I think this she's going to grab it away from me.
Well,
Could
if I
potentially
invite you to come,
could potentially go awry, and I think the MBTA project is ideal for including affordable housing.
Yes, and I invite you to come to the meeting that we're going to have a special town meeting and vote on that plan put forward by the planning board on April 8th in the evening at the high school. I don't know exactly the start time, but I can guarantee there'll be a lively debate. And so that's going to be the opportunity to explore that. But right now, we really have to stick to our knitting and talk about the definitions of affordable housing in the town right now. One quick question from Mr. Sepula, and then we're going to move on to the, oh wait, there's a Z? And the person in the back who hasn't spoken first, and then we'll get to the foundational water and sewer.
I would like to address
Thank you.
that MBTA because I have an answer.
Okay.
Right. Oops. Can you hear me? This is just to insert this. And
Identify yourself, please.
Christine Downing, 19 Parker.
Thank you.
Come over here and get it.
Okay. My name's Christine Downing, 19 Parker Street. I'd just like to drop these in because it's not showing up. It's just, and I know you're all green, but there's no comment about making these houses green. Doesn't need to be discussed today, but I'd like to see it like folded in somewhere.
It's in the principles of the trust.
Yeah, thank you. And just a note, which I brought up before, prefab houses carries a certain kind of negative sense, but they're called manufactured houses now. I'd just like a quick view of how many people have been in a manufactured house. Yeah, okay. That'll do it. Thank you.
All right, Z, 30 seconds you got, sir. Thank you. Well, you've got to wait for the mic, please.
I'm confused about the MBTA business is because the director, Ed Augustus Caesar, has interviews on television and in the Boston Globe saying that if we're going to solve the affordability crisis in Massachusetts, this transit-oriented development delay has got to be passed. They confuse affordable housing with their vision of a transit-oriented development. So there's probably 50, 60 people in this room listening to you people talk about affordable housing. How many know how listen to television or get the Globe and see affordability in the same context of the TOVD? So my point to you folks is to keep emphasizing affordability as distinct from the TOVD because the state is not doing that.
Exactly. That's what the point is, and that's why we're here today. And so it's very complex, and we're trying to sift through it. But yes, it's not the plan put forward as of now for the MBTA does not include affordable housing. So that's why we're here today, to talk about what does that mean for our town. And so, again, I think
If I can just say one thing, some of the biggest barriers for affordable housing is there's no land, and it's not by right for the developer. And the MBTA gives us those two things. If we can get an affordability covenant in there as well, we got a trifecta.
Thank you, Diane. I'd like to remind everybody that underneath every single house are pipes connecting us to water and sewer, which we can't live without. And I want to thank Mr. Mikas, who's the vice chair of the planning board. I was at an ad hoc water committee meeting with him in July of 22, and we were in the middle of a drought. And he was told about a report that the DPW got about water and sewer. And he doggedly pursued that report for almost a year and has summarized it in 6 slides. And so it's a tremendous amount of work that Tom has done to put forward a vision of what we're using and disposing of. The hand in the back, if you want to say something really quickly, please, and identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Michelle Allison Elwell. I live at 43 Curtis Street in Rockport, and I'm also a local realtor. We do need affordable housing here. We need it for seniors and veterans, as well as a generation of children who can no longer afford to find a house and stay in town to raise their children. We do have a stress on the sewer system. I do realize from selling a few houses in town, there were issues with drainage, particularly in the Great Hill area. Someone is still waiting to be hooked up like 3 years later because there's issues there. Some of the areas in the home, some of the homes in the area are really hard to sell because they're still on septic up there. And as we know, not all of the town is on sewer. And the prices for septic systems have greatly increased up here. So much so that a lot of people just can't afford to replace their systems. And I think if we put our heads together, we can come up with some creative living for seniors, as well as handicap, mobilely challenged people that need elevator service, as well as maybe some little bungalows, one-level living, stair-free living for many people in town that need it. And we could do it if we did little modules, tiny homes. It's possible. We just have to find the little space for it.
Thank you, Michelle, for that comment. And Tom, you want to take it over and tell us what you've learned about our water and sewer infrastructure?
Thank you, Laura. This is going to be an abbreviated version of a presentation I made to the planning board a couple months ago, which has been recorded on Zoom and available on the town website. So I'll have to zoom through this kind of quickly, so to speak. But here's sort of start out with the bottom line, and then I'll show you what's behind it. This is to dispel some common misconceptions about our systems. So the limit on wastewater is not the size of the treatment plant. A lot of people say, well, if we need more capacity, we have to build a new plant. No, and I'll show you why. The limit is actually our discharge permit, which is a government-imposed limit on how much effluent we can take out of the treatment plant into Sandy Bay. And similarly, the limit on our water supply is not the size of our 2 water treatment plants. And it's actually not even how much rainfall we get necessarily. It's our withdrawal permit. No matter how much water we have in Cape Pond and Carlson Quarry, there is a government-imposed withdrawal limit that we cannot exceed. And I'll show you what's behind that. So our water supply does come from a pond, some quarries, and some wells, and ultimately kind of limited by rainfall and underground springs and sources. Our wastewater is going to be increased by rainfall, surprisingly to some, because it's due to what's called inflow and infiltration. This means that water that should be going into the storm sewers is making its way into the sanitary sewers, and therefore going through the wastewater treatment plant, and then being discharged. So that's the problem with rainfall. So I'm going to show you a couple graphs which I've taken from this Tetra Tech consultants report. They're too complicated, but I'll try to hit some highlights on there. Here's our water supply showing time by year. And you can see a general increase in the trend of the amount of water we are withdrawing, the top of the bar. And the top dashed line is the withdrawal limit imposed by the government, 263 million gallons per year. 90% of that is considered sort of a comfortable limit to allow us some flexibility, perhaps some growth. But we've been within that the last couple of years. And there's a lot of other detail on here about what's in the total water withdrawal, but it's complex, and there are things we can do, and I'll show you that coming up. Sorry about this one. It's from the consultant. You see that? Those green spikes are me tearing my hair out, I think. But you can see the top line is the wastewater plant capacity. and that's at 1.2 million gallons a day. However, the dashed line below that, this 0.8, is our actual limitation of our discharge permit. So although the wastewater plant can go well above that, and you can see these green lines, that's kind of the monthly average. Many months we've averaged above either the nominal capacity of the plant and certainly above the discharge limit. Fortunately for us, what the government does, state and federal, is to allow us to do a 12-month rolling average on the discharge. And that's the solid blue line. So back in, what was that, 2009-ish, we were above the limit. And we got imposed on us a moratorium where we couldn't make any new connections to the sewer. In that time frame, we did what was called lining of the sewer pipes, which decreases the inflow and infiltration, and therefore the amount of water going into the treatment plant, and therefore the discharge. So that was successful. We got this blue line to go below the dashed black line, and we've been doing a series of inflow and infiltration projects on and off. So when we do a project, the discharge goes down, and then it kind of degrades with time. This is not a permanent solution. It's like regular maintenance needs to be done in different sections of the sewer lines in town. So it drifts back up, and we do another program, and it goes back down and drifts back up, blah, blah, blah. And recently it's been going back up. So we're getting close to our discharge limit again. The line below that is the target, the 80% of plant capacity. That's sort of considered a comfortable level for wastewater capacity. So we are overdue for some more inflow and infiltration work, and that's something that the DPW has been requesting money for. This costs money, and that's what we need to do to get our capacity back to be available for other expansions. So what can we do? I mentioned the top one, inflow and infiltration, reducing that by doing the lining of the pipes. That's an ongoing cost, and that will reduce the wastewater, doesn't do much for the water limits. There's one of the slides show there's something called missing water. That means the measurements at different places don't agree, and we can't necessarily account for it. We don't know if that's a measurement problem or an actual problem with leakage. If we find that missing water, that helps us with the water limit. But if we use more water, then that's a problem on the wastewater, because what comes up must go down. We can impose water restrictions. That helps you with the water supply, voluntary, or we've seen during the summer we have limitations on water use outside. That helps with water, and to a smaller extent that affects wastewater. Most of the restrictions are on outdoor use, so that doesn't really go down the sanitary sewers. That may get a little bit into the inflow and infiltration, so that might help you a little bit with wastewater. Voluntary water conservation is beneficial on both sides. That's a good thing. Something the DPW has been considering, and don't shoot me because they haven't done this yet, is called tiered water rates. So that would charge a higher rate for higher usage. So that could decrease the amount of water that's used, and therefore a lot of that would be for outside water. You wouldn't necessarily do as much irrigation, so that didn't help you as much, but some of that might influence your in-house usage, and that could help with wastewater. Here's kind of a wild idea that I think might have some traction in the future, and there's some permitting issues with this, but if neighborhoods or communities could set up their local water wells to get their own supply for irrigation, that could give you a larger amount of water available. However, some of that goes into the groundwater and gets into the wastewater, so blah, there you go. That hurts you with the wastewater. One thing that we might be able to do with planning is to use gray water systems for the higher density developments. And this is where you separate the water that goes down sanitary sewers. You have black water, which is basically toilets, and you have gray water, which is sinks, urinals, showers, washing machines, and things that can be relatively easily cleaned up for other use, like irrigation. And so gray water systems, if they are put in, even if they might be required, could help us on both grounds. That reduces the water use because some of that's replaced by the gray water reuse, and obviously doesn't go down the sanitary sewer, so that helps with that. Longer term, there's something that has an ick factor, which is treating the wastewater to drinking standards. It's been done in some places. There are places that routinely process their wastewater to drinking water quality. But you know you're drinking sewage ultimately, and so there's a bit of a ick factor to overcome. But we've
been doing it on the space shuttle for more than 10 years.
Send me up. A thing that's sometimes mentioned here is desalinating seawater. That would certainly help you with the water supply. If you put more water through the pipes, you're going to end up with more wastewater, so that hurts you there. It's very high energy, and going along with that is high expense for the energy. And also it produces, in addition to a desalinated stream, it's a highly salinated stream that has to be discharged into the ocean. That's called brine discharge, and there's some permitting issues with that, so don't hold your hat for that. Increasing rainwater is kind of coming at us whether we want it or not, rainfall rather. It's a regional trend from climate change that gives you more water, but to the extent that it goes down into the sanitary sewers, it's going to hurt you a little bit there. And I think that's the end of my presentation. So we have some things ongoing that will help, and some things that are longer term that are more difficult to do, but there is hope.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Alan? Could you identify yourself, please, sir?
Yes. Alan Macmillan, 18 Story Street. Tom, I highly encourage you to not think of community water wells at all. 35-year member of the Conservation Commission, 12 years as chair.
Okay.
When you have wells on private property, most people seem to forget that at the bottom of that well is what's called a cone of depression. You're sucking water away from the roots of trees, and you will eventually kill trees. And most private property owners that have the sign up front, well water, have trees in their yard. They are watering their lawn. The last major water shortage we had, the last really dry summer, the Boston Globe pointed out that 1/3 of the drinking water produced in water systems on the east coast of the United States, 1/3 of that water went to watering lawns. And when do most people water their lawns? In the daytime, where the sun is sucking it up. It's a complete waste of energy, waste of time. And if you have native grasses in your yard, they will turn brown in a drought, and they will immediately turn back to green when the rains fall in the summer. So I encourage you to take that community water wells for irrigation off the chart. That should never be a system for getting more water, because you're killing the native fauna around. Thank you.
If I could reply a little bit, I think it depends on the depth of the well also.
Any other questions for Tom? Who hasn't spoken? You, ma'am?
I have spoken.
You have.
She hasn't spoken.
Yes. Hi, Judy.
Oh, Judy Bogage. I had no intention of ever. Judy
have to name-
Bogage, 6 Union Lane. I had no intention of ever saying anything or even attending a meeting like this, but I'm very impressed with our town, because I assume that all you people work without pay, and
That's
it's
correct.
voluntary. And we should give a lot of thanks to these people who give, obviously, hours into their work.
Thank you, Judy.
I should point out it helps to be retired.
Okay, I'm not retired.
You need help then.
Yeah, ma'am?
Hi, Andrea Vincent at 8 Row Point. I was wondering why water and sewer was considered part of affordable housing. But it seems to me that if we need 400 additional living units to get up to that 10%, and we're almost at capacity in the water treatment and sewer, these seem like mutually exclusive problems. I wonder, I am in favor of affordable housing, but does the limitation we have in our natural resources affect the requirement for us to get to that 10%?
Well, I think this slide speaks directly to that, and the opportunity offered by multifamily housing would be something like gray water recycling or new conservation efforts. And somebody who spoke earlier did speak of the ecological opportunities in building new buildings. So it would have, at the point of including this in this presentation is that this must, we as a town have to decide how to deal with this. And so we have to take it into consideration right at the beginning. We can't keep doing what we've always been doing. We have to think in different and new ways that include some of the bullet points. And Tom has brought these before the DPW and the planning board and the public. And so this is a collaboratively created list. And there's maybe things on here that don't exist yet. In the early days of Ad Hoc Water Committee, Al Bolter talked about treating desalinization of seawater was a major topic, 15 years ago. So we do need to look at future solutions in order to have this really seismic growth in our town happen. It's not going to happen, just on top of the current infrastructure, I think.
And also, I wanted to let you know that before the state legislature, there is the Affordable Housing Act. It is huge amount of money that would come in to build affordable housing, and it is full of infrastructure grants. So this is a parallel process.
I have two questions in the back, and then we're going to have to wrap this part up because we have one more speaker.
Hi, Jim Ugoni again, 33 Main Street. Two points. One is that I garden and I use container plants. And last year, maybe the year before, I brought a rain barrel into my house. And interestingly enough, it was the year in which there was a drought and it was necessary. And then last year, I didn't need it. And it seemed like I was doing better service by helping get rid of water. We had so much. At least that was in my mind. But having said that, two questions I have. One is that I recently came back from a different part of the world in which they did rainwater collection that went into a community well. So I'm watching all my rain barrel just pour runoff and going nowhere, just spilling out. And I didn't know if we ever do our lines over, would it make sense to be able to collect some of that? But the other question, and perhaps a myth that may be out there that you may be able to demystify, Tom, is that the metrics in terms of permitting, either exiting or intaking, to what degree does that impact the bubbler, we call it, just outside of White Wharf that's within swimming distance of where we dispose our town's gray water, I'll call it, and would there be an impact to have to move that if we increase the amount of water we are treating?
I think there's a misunderstanding here. We really can't increase the amount we discharge from the plant. That's the government limited amount. I understand that it is virtually impossible to increase that limit. That just can't do it. Manchester has looked into that, and they've discovered it's pretty much impossible. Logically, you could say if you move that further out to sea, if you do better treatment, if it's a cleaner supply being discharged, then you ought to be able to have a higher limit. But good luck with that.
And one last question.
Tom, I was just curious where what part of the country are they mostly implementing these gray water and ick water and the systems?
There's an architect in the audience who's better positioned to answer that.
And the other question I had is at the planning board meeting last week on the MBTA plan, where they did do a great job of coming out with a final area, given the limited space for development of this MBTA plan. They said that whether we have zero housing over the next 10 years, increase of zero housing units, or 500, the sewer system and the water system are going to have to be upgraded. Is that, are you agreeing with that, Tom?
Yeah, that's the thing I showed with the dark blue line sort of going back up because the inflow and infiltration treatments decay with time. They're not permanent. So if we do nothing, then we're going to, without any additional housing being connected to the sewer, we're going to go over our limit. Yeah. Because the inflow and infiltration will increase. So we have to keep after that. That's an ongoing problem, regardless of whether we have more units.
Bob, did you have something to say about the gray water?
Yeah, what his first question was, I think.
Okay.
Parts of the country.
Parts of the country.
What's happening in New England?
Yeah, I studied this as an architect.
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob Simmons, One
you,
Gap
Bob.
Head Road. I studied this a bit in my business of working with campuses on gray water and they call it purple pipe water, which UMass Amherst, for example, they use that. They have a whole water system where they collect the water off of all the roofs in the entire campus, and they filter it 3 times, and they reuse it for irrigation and for toilet flushing and some of the major uses for water on the campus. The pipes are colored purple and the water is dyed a purplish blue color to make sure that nobody's drinking it, right? But on the desalination thing, there is this tremendous ick factor, but when you really study it, you find several things. One is that water is way more pure in its final form than anything we are getting from wells or treatment plants here now, because it goes through a three-step process, reverse osmosis process, which gets rid of all the solids in it, dissolved pharmaceuticals, which we're drinking now, and all the kinds of pollutants that aren't even measured currently in the water treatment systems that we currently have. So Singapore, for example, they're an island nation. They're very limited on how they get their water. There's approximately, it had been 40% of their total drinking water was coming from the process of just treating their sewage and getting it back to what they call new water. And so it's not a thing that hasn't been tested at great scale. I think they're up to like 60% now with all their drinking water from that system. They tried to do it in California. They tried to sell it with a lot of Hollywood stars, and it just fell flat. People just couldn't get over the ick factor, but it may be time to, 20 years later here, to relook at that program.
Thank you, Bob.
The other thing I wanted to mention just quickly is one thing that's not specifically on Tom's list, and this is something I threw out to the select board when they were asking people, surveying people, what would they do with the ARPA money. And I said, well, one thing that's not really, generally with the mass plumbing code and all the plumbing codes around the country, basically when you renovate a place or build a new place, you have to have low flush toilets and low flush or low use faucets and shower heads and all this stuff, right? But New England is full of ancient houses, and the process of those plumbing fixtures getting updated will take decades and decades and decades. So I suggested a bylaw in town to make it mandatory to update those plumbing fixtures in, say, 5 years or 8 years, whatever it would be, and to use some of the ARPA money to help subsidize the actual either installation or purchase of those low flow fixtures for people. Yeah, just something for us. They decided not to use the ARPA money for that, but there may be some other opportunities in the future.
Good idea, Bob.
I mean, cutting those low flow fixtures could take us down another 10 to 20% on some rough calculations, getting our water usage down from the very beginning.
Thank you. And the other thing, just really quickly before I introduce our last speaker, Tom, on one of the early slides, you show that 25% of the water that is, we don't know where it's going. And so what the DPW and the consultant said, oh, that's not alarming, you know, because that's typical, unfortunately. But that's a real area for us to discover where it's going, because we can, you know, is it a metering thing? Are we leaking that much water? What's going on with that? Do you have a comment, Tom, or?
Yeah, there's an issue about some of the reports that I've drawn more recent data from, and we're going back to reanalyze that. 25% may actually be 25 million gallons per year, which is a smaller amount of missing water. But still, we ought to be able to do better. And there are some ongoing tests that other consultants will be doing to try to nail down how much of that is a metering error and how much of it is actual.
Thank you. So thanks to Tom for his presentation. And we'd like to end up the session with another story from Granite Street Crossing. I'd like to introduce Carol, a new resident to Rockport, and she moved into Granite Crossing recently and has a story to tell. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Yes, actually, I've been in Rockport, living in Rockport for about 8-9 years. My mom is from Rockport. My dad is from Gloucester. I grew up in Reading, but I ended up back here on Cape Ann, where I raised my 3 kids, and we rented. We always rented. Well, there were 2 brief periods of owning a home, but they're not even worth talking about. So I rented. My 3 children eventually flew away, you know, nicely, finished college. They have their own lives. I lost my husband at about the same time I moved to Rockport. So when I moved to Rockport, I am fortunate to have an aunt that lives here. And she knew of an apartment directly across the hall from where she lived. And I was able to move into that apartment. And I don't know if I should talk numbers, but I'm going to. My landlord was so generous to me and to my aunt, who lived there for 18 years. I was paying under $900 for a 1-bedroom, nice 1-bedroom. So why in the world would I want to go into Granite Street Crossing? Well, I'll tell you, the panic for all of us in the prices of renting right now, I kept thinking, what happens if my landlord sells? Where in the world am I going to go? I would be totally lost. So I planned ahead. I entered the lottery. I was lucky number 13, and it still is my lucky number.
You and Taylor Swift.
Yes. So I moved in last September, and it's just such a relief because I was worried. Yes, my kids are in the position they could help me out. I don't want to rely on my kids. I want to rely on myself. And with the help of this affordable housing program and subsidized housing at Granite Street Crossing, I was able to move in. I love all the ideas about the tiny houses. I follow them all online. But if you want to see tiny, come to the apartments in the senior building at Granite Street Crossing. They are 355 square feet. Wow. Okay. Now, they're tiny. They're very, very small. But with a little creativity, I've learned to make it work. And it's totally worth it for me just to be able to be part of the community. I work on a couple different committees in town. I help out my neighbors. And so it's a good place for me to be. And I couldn't help out those neighbors if I was paying more rent than what I am now.
Thank you, Carol. Welcome to Rockport. And thank you all for coming today. We're at the close of our program. I want to remind everybody that we have a sign-up sheet for the Rockport Affordable Housing Coalition. And I do know that the trust itself is looking for more volunteers. To Judy's point earlier, a lot of things happen in Rockport thanks to volunteers. So if anybody has a mind to join the trust, we really need you on that. The Ad hoc Water Committee also needs members for folks who are interested in water and sewer. Encourage you to pick up the handouts as you leave. And Barbara, you want to say something?
Well, I just, I especially want to thank you all for coming, and those on Zoom as well.
Identify yourself.
I am Barbara Kaplan. I've lived in Rockport for 36 years. I'm at 4 Ocean Avenue. And we are a group of citizens just like you. And our main goal today was to bring you information so that you can make informed decisions and go to town meeting and vote to make things happen. We see it as, I see it anyway, as saving Rockport, because we need a vibrant community with families, children, multi-generation, multi-economic. So aside from wanting to live in a vibrant community, the state mandate, well, all right, the state mandated. But it's the right thing to do. People need a place to live, and we need to open our community to them. So if you have those feelings, keep learning more and more, and show up at town meeting, and begin by voting for the changes that are made so that we can begin the process of increasing affordable housing in Rockport. Thank you.